I support. The chance goes to the Honorable Orero of Kibra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want first of all to thank you for giving me this time to contribute to this very, very important motion of today. Now, I want to thank the two colleagues of mine who brought this bill today, amendment bill, Honorable Mule and Gishumu, for having spent their time, not just spending their time, but thinking about such an important motion. I think this is one of the motions which has brought the different political divide together. If you look at the contributions from both sides of the House, if you had emotionmeter to measure the emotions of people in this House, you will realize that we have the same denominator. We all believe that this kind of amendment should be done, not today, but yesterday. We have realized, and as I stand here today, I stand one as an educationist who has benefited a lot from a CDF fund, NGCDF fund. Not directly, but because I have handled students who solely depend on the CDF money for paying school fees. We have come up with the CBC, where we require to build schools, not necessarily in secondary schools, but also in primary schools. The government alone, without the national government, without the national NGCDF fund, will not be able to build those classrooms enough for the students to transit to the next level. The more we delay with the funds, the more confusion will be in the implementation of CBC in our country. I have looked at moments where emotions have risen beyond control. I have only come with two instances. When we have elections, you can see emotions rising on different divides of political parties. But I have seen emotions rising from all the Kenyans about this NGCDF fund. There is nowhere in this country, anybody can correct me, where a student is not home because of lack of school fees. Now, this is not only in areas where we have different political parties, it is in all the areas in this country. I would be lying to myself in my mind if I don't mention that the most affected areas in terms of the delay of the funding of NGCDF are the slum areas. I represent a slum, and one of the biggest slums, as I always say, that is Kibra, where people talk about selling cows, having farms where they can dig and reap the benefits. In our slums, we don't have farms. And therefore, our kids, the most affected kids are those kids coming from slum. In fact, I am reliably told from the ground that almost half of our students now are at home because of lack of the fund, which has been there from, I think, the first time this bill was brought was in 2003, then it was again in 2007, 2013, and 2015. I must commend the magnanimous way that this House always does their work. You have corrected this. The last time it came in 2013, when the courts were against these funds, not courts, but the activists, you came up with the procedures and processes where it was reinstated again in 2015, and that is why it's still there up to now. I want to draw parallelisms in the reactions of our courts. When we have matters in this House which are important, like the last time we had matters here, we were voting against the election of the clerk. The two sides did not compromise. And the Speaker has had to use his wisdom to come to a compromise on how we can do the right voting. It is my thinking, and not really my thinking or wild imagination, that the courts of this country must look at the emotions of the people before they give rulings. They should not be giving rulings which are not consistent, which are at variance with the emotions of the people in this country, especially on matters that touch on the interests, and not just interests, but on the education of our kids in this country. I want to say that in my constituency, we have benefited almost more than any other constituency. It is a small constituency, but with a very high population rate. We need schools, we need kids who go to school, we need to have compulsory basic education, and this cannot happen if we don't have the funds from the CDF. I must appreciate that for the last few years, we have tried to fulfill the government requirements that we have all children in school, and this has only been enabled by the fact that we have this fund being given through the NGCDF. As a first timer in Parliament, when I was coming, I thought I was going to be the patron of the CDF. I realized that the members of Parliament do not have a single role in determining how the CDF money operates. And that is why this CDF money is not for the MPs. In fact, the criteria used to determine the board of management of the CDF is so elaborate. You have to apply, you have to go for an interview, and this does not require the presence of the member of Parliament. And therefore, those who think that this CDF money is for the MPs are misguided. This CDF money is meant for the kids and for the poor kids who are in secondary. It is meant to build schools, to bring security within the system, to develop TVET centers, and also to make sure that we have a 100% transition rate. I therefore believe that any normal and any sane Kenyan would believe and agree with me that we need this money more than yesterday. Something tells me in my mind that this money will be there, but how long is it going to take to be there, for crying out loud? I want to say that we must ask the government that they release this money as soon as immediate, because people are suffering. The economic state of this nation is not good, and the more we delay with this funding, the more our kids are getting affected. We are saying that the most affected kids are from poor families. Those coming from well-to-do families are in school. We must equalize. Education always equalizes people. We must make sure as parliamentarians that we urge this government, we urge the authorities, the Treasury, to release the funds before it is late. Mr. Speaker, because of time and it is getting late, I would want to say that I support this motion, and I urge all my colleague parliamentarians that we support this motion. Thank you, and may God bless.